Okay, so a possibility exists as of 2:12 a.m. on February 2nd, 2021, that somebody allowed for an intentional group default of student loans in order to put students or former students or people that have some outstanding federal loan obligation into a situation of default so that other people could acquire the agreements connected to those loans as property and then could enforce some form of lien upon that property. This is my understanding. My thing was that they were going to be sensible and treat it like real property, almost like a mortgage or a lease for actual physical space. But it seems like they're too sleazy to value people at that level. And so rather than having up to 60 days before you're served with eviction and then they can begin the processes of foreclosure, they're doing some 30-day lapse in the payment and then all of a sudden they get to lean on you. Okay. For your information, it's very difficult to find this information these days unless you find an old legal book. But prior to the early 1990s, under the Uniform Commercial Code, Section 420 had to do with mechanics liens, i.e., if you leave your car in a garage for repairs, the owner of the garage can enforce a lien upon the vehicle while it is being involved with services connected to that garage. Now that's been changed. That particular 420 has been changed. But I contend that people who have long-term security instruments coded to the time frame during which that aspect of the UCC was still in effect have been using it and trying to seduce or lure people with the promises of marijuana legalization or normalization, in addition to other forms of intoxicants or other kinds of activities, including sex acts, pornography, or some other form of sexual stimulation, to seeding or permitting for themselves to be put into an altered state of mind for two reasons. One, in that altered state of mind, they're less likely to attend to details that would be necessary to attend to if there was an honest, direct, non derivative agreement concerning obligations or performance measurement that was expected of somebody in order to be determined to be engaged at a level regarding being meriting compensation or earning potential and or establishing credit so that then they would be able to benefit themselves. The more likely you're more likely to miss a date here or there or to divert it to the wrong account so you don't get credit if you're high. Secondly, by engaging in even recreational use of certain substances, people can determine or cast aspersions on your character or your capacity to control your appetites. That can be disabused in order to try to lure you into even more dangerous, high risk, or illicit activity so that they can increase their leverageability by using you, i.e., trafficking you and giving you drugs to try to compel you into performing for them while you're being trafficked, or could be a means by which they attempt to impugn your credibility and or speak to some justification for denying that you are personally mentally competent to make your own decisions. So then they can say, well, I demonstrated that I had the control because I got him to smoke that joint. Right? Right? And so once they do that, then they can say, well, I have control. It's my property. It is very unfortunate that because of what happened specifically, but not exclusively, during the Obama administration, which had been allowed to accrue since prior administrations. And we're not talking about what this is. We're not talking about the fact that opportunists are attempting to exploit the fact that nobody thus far has actually responded to the level of criminality we're dealing with and holding the culprits accountable. They've instead spent so much time investing in a cover up of people that are truly degenerate in terms of what they understand to be permissible or what they expect to be able to get away with. That now they're attempting to normalize peonage and they're willing to use biological weapons to effectuate it, and they're willing to lie about using biological weapons to attempt to ensnare us into acceding to accepting a violation of our 13th Amendment. Now, I've contended and I've proven that federal student loans are not conventional loans. They are part of the capital outlay process for the federal budget, and they have been at least since 1993. I just finished 25 years of obligation connected to federal student loans, and I proved 3 years in a row that Congress was completely derelict in its duty and adhering to the law when it came to addressing the appropriations process. And instead is attempting now, I believe, to extort people using federal student loan debt that is more difficult to address when there is an intentional effort to contrive economic catastrophic scenarios in order to cover up for their crime and dispossess us of our property so we have the capacity to provide for ourselves without having to pay kickbacks and bribes, and see to a bureaucratic collectivism that is unconstitutional and unfortunately harkens to time frames in American history that, even if we need and we do to revisit, have thus far been revisited with the wrong aplomb, with the wrong decorum. You understand, there were other processes that should have been prioritized. If you don't want to be called out for participation in a communist conspiracy, then you need to understand what it means, functionally speaking, when they use the methodologies of the former communist regimes and the current communist regimes to brainwash people into accepting peonage and slavery as a substitute for political process. If you're concerned about racketeering and the infiltration of organized crime into important economic and political sectors, then now is absolutely the time in American and, by the way, global history for us to be addressing the outstanding and delinquent due that we have in this country connected to compounded outlays associated with our budget. We can do this without a forced collectivization, a forced and contrived centralization of power that's also accomplished through an intentional effort to dispossess us of our property, up to and including our intellectual property, so it can be used by gamers who don't even keep their own books. I keep my books. That's mine. If you're on my book, you're not in control. This has gone too far. I'm just letting you know. If you're somebody that is in a situation where you are delinquent in a student loan, especially if you're African American and they're trying to sell you a black future, then understand that they're intentionally manipulating and contriving access to public information, and they will and have already used the lure of sexual stimulation and intoxication in order to compel you to cede your rights to have ownership of your own body. I'm sorry, even if you thought you agreed, slavery is illegal. You're not allowed to do it, and they're not allowed to do it to you.